So I gave a talk on ML like last year. Was it last year at the Credit Suisse? Talked about the JSR 381, which was visual recognition for Java. So I worked on it with my colleague Zoran in Serbia for like years because we didn't want Python programmers to have a little fun. So we built a Java API. So I'm going to kind of go back a little bit just to explain, because some people weren't there, what all this is, what ML is. But real quickly, then I want to dive back into the programmatic aspect. Come on, man. Okay. So yeah, those are our topics. So what do you think is going to be the most popular programming language for this year?
Forth.
Prolog.
Intercal.
Python. Anyone else?
JavaScript.
JavaScript. English.
Rust.
Go. Okay. Well, I covered it up. So, because at the end I'll release that. So it's not Java. So we'll see what it is. Let's go. Okay. So machine learning. So here's the work I did with Zoran. So if you want to do visual recognition in Java, Oracle is now using this in the course at the JCP meeting in Singapore next week. So they're going to use our API. It's a very simple API, and the reason why we did that because there's like 15 Java APIs out there to do visual recognition and machine learning, but they're all C language, which is some simple syntax sugar. It's not really Java. Like you have to understand C to program with these things. We were like tired of that, so we want to build a real Java library for Java developers. So you feel like, yes, this is Java. This is not C language. I don't have to put like parameters, like 10 million parameters in a method, like you do in C language. I mean, C was my first love, so it's not anything against C language. Okay, so there was this guy back in the 40s. So he said this, that the most interesting aspects of the world is that it's made up of patterns. And nobody paid attention to him. And then the ML, conference at Dartmouth came out in the mid-50s and talked about all kinds of other stuff. And of course, we didn't have computing horsepower then, so it didn't really go that far. But he said this before that conference, before the big Dartmouth conference. But nobody paid attention to him. So we know as programmers, this is a very familiar book, right? There's design patterns. There's that word, right? And this book was influenced by that talk using pattern languages for OOP, using pattern languages. We know about regular expressions. Those are patterns. And it turns out that regular expressions, who knows why they were invented? Anybody know why they were invented? We use them every day, right? Why were they invented?
Because we needed them.
Well, of course, we needed them. They were invented for machine learning. So back in the 40s, when artificial neural networks were invented, actually it goes back into the 30s, when someone thought of it but they couldn't implement it, so someone came up and implemented it very crudely in the 40s. So to test it, a scientist, Stephen Klein, he invented regular expressions to test artificial neural networks. They were invented to test them on the use case was text.
Really?
That's why they were invented. Yes.
Is that why they're also unintuitive?
What was that?
Is that why they're also unintuitive?
Well, if you feed it into ChatGPT, it becomes intuitive. And I'll show you an example. So that's why regular expressions, but these are text patterns. Remember that word. It's a pattern. When we look out at the world, and in my opinion, it's universe, it's not just world, we see all kinds of patterns, right? We see, like, since I'm a musician, there's patterns all over the place in music, right? Whether you're a jazz musician, rock musician, pop. If you're an animal looking for food, there are patterns. And my dog, when knows how to get food from me, knows what to do, right? There are patterns. If you play sports, You know, if you play, you know, American football, or regular football, real football, or football where you don't use your foot, it's still called football. And when I worked for many investment banks, we used patterns, right? So patterns are all over, especially, I mean, when I was in high school, I wanted to be an astrophysicist. So I found out that I had to work at night all the time. So I sort of gave that up. But there's something that really dawned on me. There was something called Chandrasekhar's limit. Something called Chandrasekhar's limit. And it's when a star becomes, it kind of grows and becomes chaotic and it's unstable, and then what happens? Supernova, right? It becomes so chaotic, a supernova, and then it comes back to a more stable state. So I always remembered that. And then I thought, like, you know, when I was being a musician, I thought about, like, Elvis Presley. Why was he popular? Why were the Beatles popular? And then when I was a programmer, you know, why were things like, you know, like Make was becoming a pain in the tuchus to deal with, right? There's complexity. And then it blew up. So it's like, oh, then it came back to a more stable state with other tools. So I thought, like, oh, these are all patterns. These are all patterns. So, like, the universe with supernova had a match with Elvis Presley and the Beatles and Make. So I started thinking, wow, there's patterns all over the place. So then I found this. This is like really cool. This is like from 2014. So everybody knows what a slime mold is, right? So a slime mold is a one-celled creature. So in the left, here's a picture of France, right, with the major cities, and engineers designed the railroad system in France, right? They spent years and years and years building a very sophisticated railroad system. Somebody took a picture of France and put food, slimy food, which I have no idea what slimy, but put them at strategic spots representing cities, and the amount of food was proportional to the population, and then filmed the slime mold. The slime mold duplicated what the humans built, because there was a pattern. So this was fascinating. Sort of starts to question, like, human intelligence, doesn't it? It's like, you know, maybe we're just a collection of patterns too. So this is all very, very fascinating. So it's all about patterns. So there's traditional machine learning that recognizes patterns, right? You feed it data, it looks for patterns, and then makes a prediction. I mean, if you're into weather, this is not unfamiliar to you, right? You build a model and then you predict, what's the weather going to be like tomorrow? Well, based upon what happened, it's probably going to be nice, you know, and then 3 days from now, you flip a coin because it's 50-50. So that's traditional machine learning. But now we're moving to a different era. So traditional machine learning is recognizing patterns in data and then making a prediction. We won't say it's 100%, it's a prediction. Maybe it's 85%, maybe 60%, maybe it's 99%, but it's a percentage prediction with probability. But now we're in a different era of machine learning. This is like, I wouldn't say, some people call it modern machine learning, but it's just different machine learning. So we're talking about generative AI or ML, language models, and of course, everyone knows the company OpenAI. So a few definitions. So we know what a model is, right? And certainly if you're in finance, you know what a model is, right? It's a persistent entity that recognizes patterns. I have a persistent entity. Typically, it's a file, but it could be in a database. It could be, you know, streamed across a network. Something persistent that represents the data. Now, here's something that ChatGPT uses and other models use: large language models. So that's an ML model that's specifically for language. I mean, it's not rocket science definition. It's for language, and that's why it's called large language model. And now we have generative AI. So traditional ML is that you look at patterns and you do predictions. Generative AI, or generative AI ML, is that you generate something new. That's the word generative, right? You're generating something new. So it's a category of AI, or ML. I mean, AI is the big thing. Machine learning is a subset. It's a subclass of AI, right? And generative AI ML is even a subclass of that. Like, everybody heard about expert systems, right? Expert systems is an AI, but it's a different type. You know, it's not ML. It's an AI, but not ML. So it's just different classes of this stuff. So generative AI is when you create something new text. So when we're talking about LLMs, large language models, with generative AI, we're generating new text. That's generative AI for LLM. It's nothing new. It's like in my graduate project, since I was a musician, I came across an article in a magazine, I think it was like Scientific American, on creating music in a certain melody, in a certain style, I should say. Create a new melody in a certain style. This was a long time ago. That article was written like in the 70s. Generating something new from a style, from a pattern. So generative AI is not new, but it's new with the resources we have now. Right? We have cloud computing, we have GPUs, we have all kinds of new neural network algorithms. It's with the stuff we have now, we can now do something really, really cool. Sometimes you could predict the future by going back in time and saying, what was a cool idea, but they couldn't pull it off because we didn't have resources. And then you sort of like you can predict the future that way. So here's OpenAI. So OpenAI is a company, it used to be open, they still call it OpenAI. It started off an open source company, and Elon Musk was the first, founders and investors. And he's no longer, he's torturing everybody on Twitter now. But, so here's what it is. So OpenAI has a collection of services. Right? It's a collection of services. There's ChatGPT, which everybody in your family knows about ChatGPT. ChatGPT, the cool thing about ChatGPT is the UI. We all know why, good UIs that would make an application. Google.com. It was simple, right? It made it super, super popular. So ChatGPT uses the chat metaphor as a familiar metaphor, right? If you want to bring users in, you give them something that they're familiar with. Make it friendly for people. A chat application, why not? Just use that. So ChatGPT is one service on top of the GPT engine. Yes?
The internet people know that you're staying too far away from the mic when you move around.
Sorry, internet people and people of the future, which I moved away from the mic, sorry. So it's one service. It's not the only service. In my opinion, ChatGPT is not really the cool thing. It's the thing underneath that's really, really cool. So they have three major services, and I'll talk about more specifics. There's ChatGPT, the web app, and chatbot, right? Then there's DALL-E, right, which is a riff on WALL-E, right? The movie WALL-E and then Salvador Dali, kind of, mishmash of those. So there's DALL-E for images, and there's Whisper for voice to text. Right? So those are the three basic ones. I'll talk more specifically when we get to the API. And then GPT-4 is something called a multimodal language model, which is a mouthful. It's a multimodal language model, which means it's not just text, right? It's images, it's video, it's audio. So if you think about it, where are we moving to? It's not just text. It's a world of video and text and images and all kinds of. We're moving toward the machines becoming an assistant to us. It's not just chatting. It's like an assistant. So imagine like 5 to 10 years from now, when people take these services and they combine them. And we're starting to see things, when you go on Twitter and Mastodon, you see some people that are putting these things together in interesting ways. Now imagine 5 years from now. Right? So the machines are becoming more, instead of searching, instead of simple things that we think about today, the machines becoming more of a real assistant, a true assistant. Right? And here's ChatGPT. So ChatGPT, they trained it on text. Right? It's a large language model. It's basically a language ML. So they trained it on books, on Wikipedia, GitHub, the New York Times, web crawls, patents, a bunch of things. So a lot of data. And of course, we have the nice chat interface. So that's where the data is from. It's from the wide, whether you like it or not, it's from the wide world. And when we talk about code, and when makes code suggestions, remember, it's coming from the wide world, not from the specialists, not from the people we admire as programmers. It's coming from the wide world. But it's the engine that's interesting. It was trained. The engine is really, really cool, but it's trained on the data. So we all know data is really important. And as we're marching toward this, artificial general intelligence, whether that's in my lifetime or not, that's like way, way further out. I mean, it's getting better and better. We're probably at the, far end of the knowledge area, and we're getting closer to intelligence, but we don't even know what intelligence is now. And we're finding out that plants communicate. Right? Who knew that? Right? So we're still moving towards that. And also, I was thinking about this morning, this is a human perspective. Sometimes you think about it, like, am I being egocentric when I'm like this? Well, this is human intelligence. It's human intelligence. We're the alphas, right? Who knows? Right? Who knows? We used to think that we were alphas back in primitive times. We thought like, we were, they're saber-toothed tigers, and we were the alpha, and we were killing them. It's like, no, actually, no, we were not the alphas. They were preying upon us. This is a recent discovery. So sometimes you have to think like, maybe our way of thinking is so centric in our mind as humans that maybe it's not correct. Very Buddhist, isn't it? So now let's finally get to the meat of the matter, the API. Okay, so there's 7 categories for APIs. 7 categories. I'm walking away from the mic. Okay, so there's chat completion, where basically a chatbot. There's an API. I'll show you the API. It's a simple chatbot, a conversation. There's text completion. There's text completion, which says, here's a pattern. I'm going to give you a pattern, and I want you to generate new text, but in that pattern. So that's text completion. There's another service called code completion, which, as we all know, being programmers, that it completes code. We'd say, here's the pattern. Here's what I want you to do. In other words, the pattern. Give me code that matches that pattern. So those are those 3. Image generation is generate images. You specify text and give you images. Then there's Whisper, which is the speech to text. Because you imagine, if you're dealing with text, we need a voice-to-text API to make it easy. So they offer that too. So instead of typing in text, you're going to speak, which some people have already implemented. Now the bottom 2 are really cool. This is where I think we're going to see really interesting things. So the model, the general ChatGPT, or the general GPT, is trained on basic text of all those sites, New York Times, Wikipedia, GitHub, but you could fine-tune it. Let's say you're building a risk management system, or you're building a financial advisory system, or you're building something that's on a certain one of your favorite hobbies, or you're building something specifically for Python programming or Java programming or whatever. You could fine-tune that model, give it more data, and then we'll answer more specifically to that use case. So I think that's the area, the fine-tuning area is where we're going to see an explosion of things. Because right now people complain. People that don't understand what ChatGPT is, it's like, oh, look at the results coming back from ChatGPT. It's terrible. It's not right. It just hasn't been trained on the data. So us as programmers, as creators, we can fine-tune the model to our own use cases, or our company's use cases. You want to create, actually I was talking to Rodrigo, we were thinking about looking at all of the text from all of our videos, feeding that into using fine-tuning, and then either writing blog posts, automatic blog posts from that, or asking questions from the speakers in the video, even if they're not there. And that would be the NYJavaSIG model. So just think about it. There's all kinds of ideas, and I want you to think about ideas. So this is how you use ChatGPT. Not just the front end, but how you tweak this. And there's also embeddings, if you want to get a little more in-depth on how close 2 words are, or 2 sentences are, or anomaly detection, like you're doing spam detection in email or something like that. You can get actual stats, like hardcore floating point numbers on that. So that's very useful. So all these are important, but I think the fine-tuning area is a really cool area. is following the keystrokes. Okay. All right, so let's talk about some code. So the first thing I did when I was programming, I said, I don't know how to program ChatGPT, so let me ask it, how do you program yourself? So I asked it, give me a curl script, so at least I can understand what's going on before I write a Java program. So give me a curl script that connects to ChatGPT. So I asked it, and it didn't give me back this. It gave me back something similar to this. And I said, wow, that was pretty easy. So I just cut and paste, or copy paste, and it didn't work. It just didn't work. Of course, you need the API key, right? So you connect to OpenAI, and 24 hours later you get an email with your key. But the code didn't work. So what I found out, that I said, okay, well, I guess I have to RTFM, and I went into the docs, and I said, like, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong, so I changed it, and it got it to work. ChatGPT information stops at September 2021. It doesn't know anything that happened after 2021, unless you fine-tune it. So, ask it. Ask it if Jeff Beck is still alive. And he's not. That's my favorite guitar player. So it doesn't know anything from I think it's either August or September 2021. So, in other words, it didn't even know its own API. Because I was sending me an old API and it was deprecated, so it didn't work. So that's how I found out, okay, well, its knowledge stops there. So I did read the docs and I got this. So it's quite simple. It uses this, it's a REST interface, or we all know how to deal with REST interfaces, right? So here's the URL. You tell it, like, I want JSON back, here's my key, right, whatever, you put your key there. And so the way that you program it, there's a model, right? There's text models, there's images models. It turns out there's, I think there's 72 models that OpenAI offers. And the ChatGPT 3.5 was the one when I created this slide. Of course, there's 4, there's a new one. But here's the interesting thing. There's like this little JSON language here. This little JSON, there's -d, curl. What model you want, and here's messages. Here, I'm a regular user. There's 3 roles. There's user, system messages, and assistant messages. So this is one number user. I'm going to ask it, give me the joke of the day. And I got back this. So this is what I got back. And just for the record, JQ is just a JSON utility. You can pretty prints JSON, and you can query parts of JSON. I mean, everybody should have, if you're a command line person like me, have JQ. So it brings you back this, and here's really the output right here. And it says, sorry, AI model, I don't have access to jokes, but I can generate one. So it gives me a joke. So that's the output I got from that simple program. Okay, so then I want to, I don't want to not have Zoom take my keystrokes. Come on, man. Okay. So this was my next thing. So I asked ChatGPT to write a Java program. I said, give me a hello world program. And this is tough. This is really tough. Anyone know the alternative for the mouse, for the arrow keys? This is it's a nice try. Sorry about this. Okay. So my next thing, and this isn't, we're not the Java thing yet, but I wanted to duplicate the ChatGPT interface. So, and the top is just like that's not important. The important thing is that I just this loop down here, and the important thing is that I'm getting a message from the user, and I just send it to ChatGPT, and then I do a JSON preprint thing. Come on, man.
Trying the next slide.
I'm trying to go to the next slide.
What if you try spacebar?
Okay.
What if you switch?
No, it's
Not the presentation mode, but just the slides.
that's my next thing. That's a good suggestion. I'm gonna try that next. Okay. So here it is. I'm not sure where it's happening, but so I duplicated the interface by hello, tell me a joke about it. For some reason it puts this \n first. I'm not sure why it does that, but tell me a joke. Let's go more talkative. And here's something. Here's invite a speaker to a conference, and it gave me this whole thing about how to invite a speaker. Now here's another one. I said I want you to act like a comedian, and then I'm going to give you some topics, and I want a humorous take on a Java programming. So it gave me, a stand-up bit on Java. But the thing is, here's what's interesting. I gave it a pattern, right? So the pattern is the thing up top. So here's a pattern. I'm telling it, here's my pattern, and I want you to match it with the words that you know. And it doesn't know, so there's no intelligence. It's figuring out what is the most probable word. Actually, correctly, the most probable token. The token is sort of like 4 characters. So what's the most likely thing next? What's the most likely thing next? Until finally it puts together sentences. So there's no real intelligence. It's just probability of the next words. How about this one? Develop a science fiction script that describes a conversation. And I just made this up. Okay, 2040, there's an Italian boy in vacation in Greece, and he has a quadcopter, he's flying around, there's a swarm, he's being attacked by aliens. Write this script. So this went on for like 4 pages, and I stopped it. And it wrote me a whole script. It was kind of cool how he evaded the aliens. Yes?
So, are you claiming that the ChatGPT model is essentially local? That it's going from one word to the next, where it's not considering it any way, and this is a story, for instance, the structure of the story, or where it might ultimately be trying to resolve the story, but that it's just, A to B to C, and making each decision as it goes along?
It's a little more than that. It's not purely sequential, but it's mostly sequential in terms of its generative things, from what I understand. In my graduate project, when I was creating new melodies, I just looked at sequences of notes, and then I had a tree of probabilities, and I just went on to the next melodies and generated that way. So it was sequential. The generation was sequential. What happened internally might not have been sequential, but the output was. And since I mentioned the word sequential, what's interesting is that, so what made all this possible? How come all of a sudden in the past less than a year this is going to be possible? Well, in 2017, while the machine learning industry was going a certain way, Google came along with something called the transformer architecture in 2017. Anybody heard about that? What was the big thing about the transformer architecture? Historically, before that, you had to analyze data sequentially. You had to get the data and read it. When I was for my JSR, when I was training it on pictures of like dogs or cats, I would start it and then I would go have a nice long dinner, and like 3 hours later, 4 hours later, just on a few hundred pictures. So the big thing about transformer architecture is that it's parallelizable. So in the cloud, you could bring up those machines and do training really fast. That was the big thing. And now we're even going further. I mean, Stanford released Alpaca recently. You can do a lot of this on your desktop. So things are flying so fast right now. Okay, so here's the API. I mean, you know how to read the docs. So there's a URL for the docs. There's 72 models. Let me see if I can.
We have 2 internet questions when you roll.
Here, what's the internet question, Gene?
The first internet question, ironically, is on topic. Before you pulled up the REST API, someone asked, can I use the ChatGPT REST service when the UI is unavailable due to overload?
Can I use it when the service is not available?
No. When the UI is not available, does the REST API have the same problem? Please repeat the question.
Yeah, sometimes it times out. 'Cause it's
Sometimes, well, if you notice that it's quite busy these
Yes.
days. As a matter of fact, when I was writing my demo for today, it just timed out.
So they both time out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that instead of saying yes, because you've got the microphone?
So when the UI times out, the service could be busy.
Okay. And the other question, remember to repeat the question, is the OpenAI technology special in that it has such a broad range of knowledge? You say it's all in the UI, but ChatGPT seems so much smarter than other bots.
It's because it's trained on a lot of data, and it looks smart. And sometimes if you look at code, it might not be so smart. It's a machine, so you have to question the data you get back from it. It's a tool. It's like Grammarly. Everybody's Grammarly. It's like Grammarly plus. It'll give you good stuff back, but you better check it. Right? It's a good tool. So what I was about to do, and let's see if I can make this larger. Can you see that? Yeah. CLEAR. All right. So models. So here's a little script that gives how many models there are in OpenAI. So models, ISH. So they're little models, right? Oops, sorry. These are all the models. So I think there's 60. Let me see. Models. WC-L. There are 68 models. Right? And some of them for text, some of them are for images, some of them for other things. But so those are all the models. Now I want to point out to you, because I got bit by this, that language that I showed you back here, for curl-d, you're sending data. It's a JSON thing. Every model has its own way of talking to it. So I wrote Java program. I wrote a nice Java program for a certain model, and it said, "Oh, this worked great." Then GPT 3.5 came out, and I ran it, and it broke. Every model has its own language, so you have to be aware of that. So you can be, your head will explode trying to get it to fix it, because every model is different. So you have to make sure your code matches the model. So I got bit by that, so don't get bit by it. So here's the API. Things like how many tokens come back, what's the maximum, give me the text that you want, what model do you want to use. There's things like temperature. Temperature is like how creative do you want the answer to be? How creative. If you make it very creative, sometimes it's nonsensical. It's like it's on weed or something. It's completely nonsensical. So it says that keep it like at 0.2. If you put it up to like 2, it'll like, what the heck? It's not even making any sense. So it's very creative. So keep it very, very low. There's a few other options. It's very simple to program it. It's just a JSON object, and you send it that. So here's a Java API. So when my Java API broke, then I said, like, okay, I'm going to deal with a new model. I started looking. I got to deal with Java with double quotes. I have to deal with JSON with double quotes, and then my bash script and dealing with quotes, single double quotes there. My head was going to explode. It wasn't dealing with OpenAI. It was dealing with double quotes. It was driving me bananas. So I sort of like, all right, I gave up. I had a margarita. I said, like, I don't want to do this anymore. So then I found a library on GitHub, like we all do. Hey, let me look on GitHub for a library. So there was one called from Little Cat, which was The code was very clean, he did a really good job. It's not complete, he only covers part of the API, and I mean, both Rodrigo and I were playing around with this. There's another one called OpenAI-Java, which seems more complete, so I'm going to take a look at that, and I would suggest starting with that one first. The other one is pretty simple, and the code does a very good job. It's a good Java program, but it doesn't cover the entire API. So this is basically ChatGPT in Java. That's all there is to it. All right, he has a ChatGPT object. I get data from the user, I send it to ChatGPT, I get rid of that annoying \n here. And then Rodrigo in 5 minutes created the Spring Boot version. So it was pretty simple. It was pretty simple. Okay. Okay, now here's the interesting part. So I asked it to write a Java program, right? And he gave me back this nice, I didn't format it, but it's a hello world in Java in red, right? So that was fine. Suppose you have this requirement, right? You have a directory of PDFs, and you want a program that reads them, gets text out of the PDFs, and puts the new one in a file, and then name the new ones with an appended sequence number, like 10102. How long do you think that would take you?
To write the code?
To write the code. Working code.
3 hours?
Couple hours, right?
No.
Couple hours.
Depends on what library I have handy.
So in 5 seconds, you gave me that.
We take more than 5 seconds.
And then I said, "Well, give me another version." You gave me that. So, is it totally optimal? Probably I could take a look, but it created it for me, right? It went out and found it. It's not, this is not like a James Gosling quality code. It's just, it went out into GitHub and found the average programmer stuff. Now, think about it, like some years from now, somebody's going to say, like, I'm going to talk to all the really good programmers, and I'm going to fine-tune the model so it's only good programmer stuff. So I'm going to sell that model to you. So instead of getting a general view of the general developer solution, you're going to be able to buy, maybe hopefully open source version of the super programmer code. Right? Not now, but you would think that there's going to be like wines, like vintage wines, right? There's certain vintages, right, of certain types. That's what's going to happen. These things are going to be fine-tuned. So remember, it's not ChatGPT, it's the engine that's the really cool part. So it's how you create the prompt, right? And here's a couple other prompts I was playing around with. How long do you think it would take you to create a table with cities and that, and do research? You know what, let's try this. Yeah, thank you. Let's just try. Yeah. I hope Chet's not too busy. Okay.
Can you make that bigger for us old people? Thank you.
So I also asked it for JSON.
And what's also good, you can ask to design a database schema. For instance, I was experimenting, give me, let's say I need to build a pizza company, and I need to have customers, pizza types, delivery, and it generates
a
schema.
Yes.
And he understands how usually those systems are designed internally and how their tables are interconnected.
It generated the JSON. Right? So you have to think about this, like, is this intelligence or is this just a tool that I can use? Right? That's right, exactly right. So it's a tool that makes us faster, right? Makes us Maybe not better, but it makes us faster. We have to make the decision whether it's better or not.
Frank, I use it to work on some Flutter code I was working on. I hadn't even learned Flutter. A friend of mine said he wanted to design something, so I asked a couple questions about two list views, drag and drop images. He gave me 90% of the code. It compiled. I was like, wow, this is great.
Right, so it knows about all the various languages. This is a really cool. The second one here, it's a virtual. I created a VM in text. I want you to act like a Linux terminal. And then I type this in, and it's as if I'm typing to a Linux terminal, like in a bash, in a command line. You know, things like, what does this set script do? What does this regular expression do, right? We're talking about the regular expressions before. This is another one. Write a JavaFX application. And I give it the requirements. Like when user types in here, do this, and it gave me back JavaFX application. So this is a super powerful tool. And as programmers, it's here whether we like it or not. But it's a very valuable tool. So it's how you program the engine, so-called prompt engineering. I'm already seeing job offers for prompt engineers. It's how good are you at making the request to the engine, right? So prompt engineering. And there's probably going to be tools, and some of you are going to be building tools for prompt engineers, right? And we might eventually, of course, there's now different engines, not just OpenAI, but there's, of course, Google Bard's API is going to be public soon. There's other ones that are out there. It's an explosion. This is like a big explosion. This is like, for me, I'm lucky enough that I lived during Unix and C. That was a big thing. Then it was the internet and the web. That was a big thing. With Java, that was a big thing. This is another big thing. It has legs. There's a lot of things associated with this, not just like a language, a new language. This is a whole new thing that affects us as programmers, but it affects countries. It affects geopolitics. It affects everything. So this is like, it's fascinating. So what's the fastest programming language for this year? Somebody said it earlier. It's English. And to be more accurate, it's human text. Yes, Ryan.
Just add something when you were talking about having to generate different stuff. I typed in some proprietary stuff that we have at work, like a proprietary language for some of our stuff that's out there because partners use it, and it was able to generate code for that.
For a proprietary language, so it was able to generate code in a proprietary language.
Somebody else says, other companies and everything have posted some stuff probably in PowerPoints, and when it scoured the internet, it found that because we have a language internally called M2L, and was able to generate and understand our stuff.
Because it looked at probabilities, right? What was?
Yes,
yeah.
it was able to. So it
That's
knows
interesting.
proprietary stuff. If it leaked out there on the web, it knows it.
That's
It
interesting.
can do stuff with it.
I had a similar thing. So a colleague at work, she was writing code. I think she was writing Java code, and she asked ChatGPT to generate code, and it generates really beautiful code. But there was a method there that didn't exist, and she looked at it. She goes, "That doesn't exist." And then she started laughing. She goes, "I first was laughing, but you know what? It actually made perfect sense to have a method like that." So she added the method.
Humor, this is not a question, but it's funny from the YouTube chat, so I want everyone to hear it. The instructions for Linux emulation sound like you're making a request for a genie. You're specifying every little detail so the genie ChatGPT doesn't do anything you don't want it to do.
You mean the terminal?
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. I'm giving it. Well, I'm programming it. That's what you do with a genie. You program it. So this is it's a tool. This is a tool. So our lives are going to change, right? Our lives are going to change going forward, and we need to adopt and adapt to this new world. Because if we don't, we're going to lose our jobs. And I don't mean job, I mean another programmer who is using those tools is going to take our job. So you have to learn how to use these tools. So that's my last slide. Any questions?
This is more of a comment since it's not really programming, but since Microsoft invested so much into OpenAI and they kind of have their own version of GPT-4 internally, they announced like a little less than a week ago their integration of this kind of technology with Office 365. So literally, like have the manager, give me a sales summary report, and then give me a spreadsheet, give me a presentation talking about these points, literally through text. If the Microsoft video is on YouTube, you can go find it. It basically shows you what they're presenting, and since it's Microsoft, they can at least say like, it's going to cost, and therefore we can keep the servers, and therefore it actually they will figure out a way to make money off it. But be aware that
if there's no economics,
Yeah.
things won't progress, right? So there has to be some sort of economic benefit from this. You're right, and we're going to see it not just from Microsoft, but other vendors.
Right,
You're right. It's going to be in everything we do. As a matter of fact, all the invitations from the past few months for the JavaSIG have been tweaked by ChatGPT. Yes.
Taking a step back and just thinking about it, if tools like ChatGPT are just detecting patterns in code that already exists and then writing stuff in a similar style, is this it? Is this peak programming? Nothing new will come out? It's all just rehashing the old
No,
stuff?
that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point, and I brought this up during my graduate project for music. I said, if we just generate the past, we're just going to repeat the past over and over and over again. That's true. So there is the temperature flag that generates new things that are not quite the pattern. It creates a little more randomness in that. But that is an issue. How the industry addresses that. I mean, I brought this up back in the 80s that we're just repeating the past over and over and over again. All I know is that they gave me my master's, said like, that was a good point right there. But you're right. That's a very good point. We cannot just repeat. What happens to creativity? Right? Hopefully that still remains a human thing. That we're creative. We're the ones creative because innovation will be flat then. Right? Normally there's innovation, then a spike happens, right? So humans create that spike, and hopefully, in my lifetime, we will remain doing that. 50 years from now, I don't know. Yes.
maybe yes and no, because the creativity is being paid a lot right now. That's why a lot of people invest into it. But if say these generative models create with this tuning of temperature creates things which others perceive as valuable, then the money is going over there. So why buy $100 something which I can get for $1? And then creativity is not funded by things.
That's right. It's just the same thing happening with web. When during .com, EarthWeb was a company that charged people to create websites. They charged $1 million to create a website back in .com. Because I know the owner, I know the founder of EarthWeb. He charged $1 million to create. How much is it now? Right. So there is the economics of all this. You're right, and then there'll be some better stuff and open source stuff, just like anything else. But creativity, who knows? Maybe we'll find out. Certainly, this is a very valuable tool. Look what happened in biology, protein folding. Right? Proteins, there's 200 million proteins. Right? They're critical for survival, critical for life. 2 years ago, we only knew about 1% of how proteins fold, because if they misshape, diseases happen. Right? 2 years ago, we knew 1% of how proteins behave. With machine learning, we know 100% in 2 years. That's how valuable this tool is. So it might come up with a better way of doing programming, right? A better way. Maybe there's swarms of AI, machine learning things, and they collaborate. They might go through the text of data, and they might find you know what? If you take that and you could do this. Because, as I said, patterns live everywhere. You might say there's something that happens in biology, something happens in programming, something happens in cooking. They actually use the same pattern. Why don't we do this? They might be creative in the future. We don't know. But the thing is that things are going to change. So we have to, because our companies are going to move this way, right? Because they want to move faster. But we have to move smarter too. But so you have to learn how to use these tools.
I find it a wonderful assistant. It's It certainly uses the past information, but it's creative. You need to engage. For instance, one day I said, I want to shoot a video explaining Java garbage collection in a captivating way. Let's say that my shooting setting would be my room, like big room, and I want just how to do that. He says like, just go ahead and throw out some stuff and then just pretend that like on one shot you are just application, you throw the garbage and then you collect the garbage. I'm saying, no, it's boring. Oh, but I do have kids. I have 2 kids. And I said, like, let one of the kids be thread 1, another kid is thread number 2. And he goes, all right, then take it, do this way. Like, you show only the kids, put a label, thread 1, thread 2, they're throwing the toys around. And after that, like, you appear on the stage and you're collecting all this stuff. I said, sounds good, much better, but how do I decide what toys are garbage and what toys are like live objects? And he goes, no, use some labels, markers. You can put, let's say, something, let's say, in one toy, like green, it means that live, the others are dead. And I go, come on, but when my kids were throwing those toys around, it was not clear what toys would be red, what toys would be green. And then I'm sitting. We will do it this way. Once the kids threw all the stuff around, then they would go to the corner and they would be playing with some of the toys. Those toys would be the live objects. The rest of the toys would be the garbage. And I would be collecting that garbage, not touching the kids in the corner playing with other toys. And I'm saying, how do you like this idea? He says, wow, that's the best idea. So basically, that's your assistant. Because without ChatGPT, it was a roadblock for me.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to exchange some thoughts. I wanted to try something out, and this is how you can use it.
Right, that's a good point. It's a tool.
Yeah.
It's a tool. Now, project out 5 years from now when it's not just chat, it's also video, and it's like images, and it's also gestures, and it's also this. So over the next 5 years, we're going to see all kinds of interesting things. The machine's becoming more of an assistant. Right? Yes?
It's 7:28. Do you have any closing remarks before we do private?
The closing remark is that adapt or die trying. So thank you.